Adam, I can only imagine you want to give a better introduction than what John just did. So if you'd like to share who you are, what you do, I think you have more credentials than just being the MediaPost fourth employee.
And yeah, my love life really is not that interesting either for the last 20 years. If my wife is watching, I apologize in advance. So my background's pretty diverse since leaving MediaPost, and even 10 years or 15 years prior to that. I spent my entire career in media for all intents and purposes, always on the planning, buying side. Never really ventured into sales or brand work. It's always been in media, other than the marketing role with MediaPost. Over the last 14 years, I've been at Zimmerman Advertising, which many of you know. It's on the other side of the coast in Fort Lauderdale. It's one of the leading agencies in the country, part of the Omnicom network, and focuses on retail, although we certainly have our share of national accounts. But our specialty is local marketing, retail, understanding the trade areas that are necessary to drive business as an outcome. And then over the last several years, I've morphed into a more chief innovation role, which gives me the ability to look at data, look at technology, look at all the platforms we have, and figure out ways to drive better outcomes for our clients.
Love that. And John, please take notes on the proper introduction of our star. No, so let's dig right into it. You like really set the stage nicely at the end there, talking about data and digging into some of the innovative areas in which we're moving this space. And as we've talked over the last couple days, there's a ton of diversity in the channel mix. You have these emerging retail media networks, you've got influencers, you've got, word of mouth, like so many different places in which every brand is tapping into. Do you think it's harder than ever to have a clear picture of your performance, or are we overcomplicating it?
Probably both. I think we, as an industry, overcomplicate everything to a great degree, but the challenge is real, and I won't disagree with that. I think the challenge is real because not everything is trackable, but everything is somewhat measurable, right? We pretty much have an outcome of what we're looking for. I think with the industry or certainly the business that we're in, we lose sight of the bigger picture goal, and that part is pretty clear. Is what are we trying to ultimately do for our client? It's to drive sales, generally speaking. It's to drive traffic, often the case. It's to comp sales year over year, month over month, day over week. If that is the sort of the KPI, the golden KPI, then everything else becomes a secondary metric. And I think if you focus on what are the combinations holistically to do that, that's great. Where we get into trouble to some degree is now trying to break out all those individual channels and measure those and attribute to the big picture. And I think that becomes harder and harder. If it's digital, for all intents and purposes, it's trackable. If there's a click involved, we know what's going to happen. Where you have the additional interest of trying to solve it is things like word of mouth or television or out of home, where there's impressions that are happening that certainly don't lead to a direct attribution. So measurement and attribution are sort of two different things. The challenge is sort of tying them together. But if you continue to keep your eye on the prize, then ultimately I think you'll be okay.
Got it. So I'm curious then, as we've seen this proliferation of channels over the last 5-10 years, and even more rapidly over the last couple, how are you evolving your own models? Like, what is the approach you're taking to reassess that mix and then to say, this is actually the right way we move forward on building a model to measure?
Yeah, so modeling, I've heard it multiple times in the last 3 days. We call it MMM or multi-mix modeling or media mix modeling or econometric modeling. It's a lot of words to it, multi-touch attribution. There's so many ways to do that. And again, there are barriers to each. We talked about the walled gardens the other day and the ability for us to measure things that are not, connective tissue throughout. That's an issue. And I don't think it's going to get solved anytime soon. So we got to figure out other ways to address that. And again, I think if you think about the holistic KPI, which is ultimately driving sales or driving joins, or for Planet Fitness, for instance, or e-commerce sales or traffic to a website, whatever your KPI is, the other stuff then becomes testable. You can put things in the marketplace to understand what works. We often get tied into like, well, Facebook delivered X and Snapchat Y and YouTube, Z, and that's great because then you can optimize and things. We often get caught up in the optimization so much and getting that small little incrementality, and that's, don't get me wrong, that's super important, but if that is the only focus, we lose the size of the prize. So the world of media measurement is ever evolving for sure, and I think media mix models are helpful. I've seen them fail way more than succeed, to be honest with you. We've had clients who say, well, I'm going to invest a couple $100,000 for a model. It's really not any better than what we're doing today. In some cases, it's actually degrades some of the performance because they focus on different things. It's totally about efficiency. Important again, but it's ultimately going to drive the additional sale or join in our case. So we often see we get tied into the belief that's the best possible solution. It's not always the case.
I think sometimes when we talk about measurement, we're all in search of like a panacea. Like we want something that can help us make sense across all of the channels and have like singular or a handful of KPIs. Do you think there are a couple core KPIs that really can bridge across all these disparate channels that can help us, try to evaluate them, compare them? Or do you really have to get bespoke with each channel and really evaluate it in a vacuum?
Not necessarily the vacuum, but I do think each one is bespoke. I do agree with that. And each channel is different. When the ladies who were talking about Hasbro yesterday, if you guys remember, had a really good chart up on the screen. It was a funnel chart that showed, we'll just call it the simple awareness, consideration, conversion, and she may have had other words up there, but those are the basic premise. And each channel was different along the way. And that's exactly the right way to look at it. And I give them credit for showing that slide because that's fundamentally how plans are done. And so with each one of those channels, each one has a different KPI. Now, holistically together, they're driving an outcome, but each one's very different. And you do need to plan it that way because, with television, it may be about CPM or reach or effective frequency, whatever it is, and down to search, it's cost per click or conversion and so forth. So each one's different and they have to be treated differently and optimized differently. But again, the combination is really where I think the brands succeed best when they do that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But I am curious, we could go a little bit deeper in how should we think about trying to bring consistency to our measurement? So let's say we have two channels, maybe they're both RMNs, similar KPIs we're evaluating them on, but they're fundamentally reporting in a different way. So how do you make sense of that? How do you try to bring that measure of consistency across?
I think the holy grail of that is not so much the channels per se, but think about the audience. Think about the person that's being exposed. So if you sort of shift the paradigm on what media is being effective one way or another and shift it to what is that consumer seeing? And that's where the MTA or multi-touch comes in. How many times is that single person being exposed to multiple ads? That's becomes important. So you can track their sort of purchase journey, their funnel from, that very first view of an impression, whether it's word of mouth or driving by a billboard or seeing a TV spot or did a search because they were interested, down to an action that's taken. That person is the key. It's not so much the media channel is the key, so you flip it around. So how do you find that identifier, who that person is? Mobile's great for that because people always have a phone in their pocket. They're moving around the world, and you're always going to be tracked. Most media can be sort of digitally tracked that way. When we think about one of the challenge, Doug, is like the clients that we have because it's so retail focused, is getting that person into a physical location. So we're always saying, how do you get that person into a physical location? It's hard to track that. Which media drove that? And there are things that we're doing today where we have a lot of digital technologies, one we call Centroid, where it's really a sort of a souped up place or a AI or place IQ kind of thing where we're tracking that device going into a location and then we're making that attribution. And so how do you find that person and build against that, to me, is really key.
I love where you went at the end there because it's exactly where I want to go next. Can we talk a little bit about the tools and technologies that you're using to help remediate some of these challenges? And then I know you have a personal passion around AI and how that's evolving. So bonus points if we can start digging into all of that complexity and getting into some of the real world use cases.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So, a couple of technologies stand out for us, at least at Zimmerman. One is, I mentioned, the centroid. So you think about a centroid means center of a polygon, technically speaking. So if you create that very tight polygon around a location, and drop that sort of virtual pin, if you will, on there, and actually track consumers as they break the threshold of a location. It's no longer I'm in the area anymore, which most measurement is. Now it's really I've crossed that threshold, and eliminate people who go in multiple times a day, which would be employees and things. And then you can then have an ad that appears on your phone because we served them some point, or even connected to your TV in the house. It's all IP connected. Then we can start making those attributions. This ad had an impact, physical impact into a location. We can also retarget against that person. So there's a lot of benefits to the centroid technology. The other thing that we're doing, and we've been doing this for 10 something years, and I've been part and parcel to it since the beginning, is called hyperlocal. You've heard the word hyperlocal a couple of times, and it's just basically our ability to find a unique trade area and making sure every impression goes there. Again, it's geofencing, something that's been going on for decades, where we take it from a technology into almost an agency philosophy, which is so much of advertising is what I call top-down, national, one-size-fits-all, one message fits all. TV is built 70-year premise of doing that, and there's a lot of efficiency for that. But we take a more bottom-up approach, and we say every location, every store, every retailer has its own trade area, and if we can just create those unique trade area presence, we can actually drive more outcome. So we built something called Hyperlocal, which is our data visualization platform that takes thousands of data layers, first-party data, sales data, persona data, and creates these bespoke, it's the word used before, these bespoke models, but down to an individual trade area. Not that we do 1,700 different plans every single time, but we have the ability to understand the differences around each location. Audiences are different. The competitor sets are different. The demographics obviously are different. And we can sort of marry that in. Drive times are different for each one of those locations. So technology allows us to do that. So the AI, as you mentioned before, is quickly reading all these disparate databases and coming up with a sort of a unique signal on a location-by-location basis, which is actually pretty good. And then from there, we can actually build better plans against it, which is ideally, the outcome there.
Got it. And so you started touching a little bit on the visualization piece. I'm curious if you can dig in a little bit more into how you're evolving your approach to data visualization and how we should think about it. I mean, in my own career, oftentimes when I get into any platform that's reporting out on KPIs, I immediately go to those three little dots in the corner and download CVS file, and I start working in Excel. Probably not the best way to go about managing my data. How are you thinking about providing more robust tooling, visualization to your teams and to your clients?
Yeah, so you said it in a very interesting way, right? So we start the opposite way. Most data starts in a database. It starts in some Excel spreadsheet with 10,000 rows or something. And that's just one single file, for instance. You can spend hours and hours pivoting and looking at it and trying to figure out like a story behind it. With data visualization, you literally can take that same file, plot it on a map by zip code, and within minutes, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. You'll know where that white space where sales are not coming from and should come from, where that next location should be built for a retailer, where that ethnic SKUs are. And so I didn't realize it was 45% Hispanic, and that's why we should probably be running Hispanic, a layer of Hispanic advertising in the marketplace. You just wouldn't know that until you can see it. It very quickly cuts down the work necessary to get to an answer, and that's what I love about it. They're also they're web-based, it's 24/7 access, so our teams are using it, but we also make it available to our clients. So kind of an added value or cost of doing business, we actually make that available for free to our clients so they can see the same thing.
Got it. Really interesting. And you had talked a little bit too about the very localized strategies that you're starting to employ. Can you tell us a bit more about why go hyperlocal? Why dig into that level of granularity? What's driving that strategy? And are there insights that you're deriving from your measurement that's saying, like, this is the right approach to take and might be a good approach for other people to explore?
Yeah, that was part of our conversation yesterday about local, so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it. And many of those people are in the room today, so I appreciate you guys coming again. Um, with the locality of media is, to me, fascinating, and I built my career around retail. I've always been around it in one form or another. I find it very interesting because of the uniqueness and the opportunity. So, each market's different for sure, right? San Francisco is certainly different than, Atlanta, where you're from, and any other market in between. But we take it down to the actual trade area within that. So 3 stores in San Francisco are different than 3 stores in Atlanta. Actually, they could be similar, right? And so how do you find that? And so once you identify those, again, the hyperlocal platform helps us do that, among other things. Once you understand those nuances, then the ability to market becomes very interesting. So whether it's digital, and digital is certainly a great way to get down to zip code level targeting, but even on a traditional side, zone cable, out of home, door hangers, local store marketing, we talked about that yesterday. Grand openings, we do a lot of grand openings for our businesses where we are now, finding one single location and giving it the promotions necessary 6 weeks in advance or whatever it is. It could be mobile trucks. Someone mentioned that yesterday, and we do that a lot as well. The mobile billboards, sign spinners. Like, you can literally get down to the local store marketing level. You don't see it very often, but it's actually quite effective. And then you just sort of take it up a notch and say, how can that be a little more efficient at the DMA level? And there's aggregations of dollars that make sense. And then, of course, you can do regional and so forth. We do a lot of regional sport networks, certainly in Florida, if you're familiar with down here, and up in Boston, Nesson's up there, and they were, I think, a sponsor for one of the shows here for Boston. So you can go a little higher too, but the ability for us to figure out how to spend that money specifically is really important. I'd say the other thing, aside from marketing, what's great about the local, sort of that hyper-local approach, is the actual businesses are different. So if you think about each one, it has its own P&L, so to speak, and its own budget. How are they performing versus their own comp set within their own system? Are they underperforming? Are they underperforming? Are they hitting their goals? And we can actually shift media to support each one individually if necessary, and do plus-ups where necessary, or shift dollars where necessary. Hyperlocal gives us that ability.
Are you ever finding, when you're digging into that, that there are lessons learned at the local level that translate up to your more national campaigns? And how do you go about sifting through that data and identifying when those opportunities exist?
Yeah, that is one of the core case studies that we can talk about. So we have something at the agency called, we named it RIMIT, RMIT, which kind of stands for Responsible Integrated Media Transformation. It's a process, if you will. And that process is a phase test and learn approach. Find those core markets, whether it's down to the store level, but market level, figure out what those are, phase that in and test and learn and build, and then move on to the next phase and so forth. It's usually multivariate testing. So things you can learn. What creative and messaging works, what offer works, what audience is going to be impacted, media spend levels, channel mix. Within a channel mix, different vendors or platforms within that channel mix. Once you learn one thing, then you can roll it out to more markets. Once you've have the confidence, if you will, that you've had a measurable impact, you can see that incrementality, then that could be rolled out nationally. So we do this all the time for clients, is to figure out what that proper mix or things that you need to test and learn. And so that's actually a pretty formulaic way that we've honed in, but that's a local level that could be used nationally for sure.
Got it. Really interesting. And so I think from here, I want to roll it back up to a broader conversation on, earlier you talked about how a lot of times MMMs fall apart and they're not effective. So where are you seeing brands, clients, folks in general, other agencies go wrong when they start designing their measurement strategies? Like, where are those pitfalls that people step into when they're trying to build out, their model as they head into a campaign or into a fiscal year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the places where I see it fall short is trying to take potentially a scenario and make it widespread. Like this worked in this market, or this worked at a point in time, either seasonality or channel mix or spend, and project that out for the greater campaign. that could be a problem, right? Because it could be either a good or bad thing. The other thing with media mix models that is inherently a flaw is if you haven't tested something or it's not part of your model to start with, it will never pick up. So for instance, if Facebook was never part of your initial plan, so to speak, and you run a model, it would never say, you know what, you need more Facebook, because it didn't have anything to build upon. So you almost have to test everything in order for the model to work, which inherently you can't do. And I'd say the last thing about models, and I'm not knocking models per se, I think everything has a place to help us, but where models sometimes fall short as well is what the focus on. So if the focus is on how do we drive the most incrementality based on efficiency, meaning I have a next dollar, where should that dollar go? Well, let's put it in this channel because this channel will drive theoretically more outcome for that dollar. Then everything becomes down to the bottom line of dollars. It doesn't include other things like, is it helping the brand? Is it helping to grow new audiences? Is it helping to build loyalty? Is it helping to drive lifetime value of a person? So I may get a person more expensively, but they may come back 5 more times over the lifetime of their shopping habit with our brand, and that actually is a better person for me. So you often lose sight of some of those valuable, secondary, tertiary metrics if the only focus is on how much they squeeze out of another dollar, which, again, I'm not saying it's not important, but if that's the only thing, then you can lose sight of the bigger picture. And that's where I see what models need to improve on, for the most part.
Got it. Okay, so as we start to wrap up, the rate of change is never going to slow down in this space. I can't imagine that it will. Certainly AI will be a great accelerator. How are you preparing for that rate of change, staying on top of the ball, and how can other brands and agencies really make sure that they're always at the forefront and not falling behind from the measurement side of channel proliferation and enhanced capabilities coming in through places like AI?
Yeah, so you're right. It's always changing. It's always evolving. I would go back to the very first thing, which is if you keep your eye on the focus of ultimately what you want to do to drive your business, whether it's sales, whether it's traffic, whether it's lead generation, whatever those KPIs are, and you build your plans around that. All the other things are testable. You can always move channels in and out and spend in and out, but you're ultimately trying to get to the end where the interesting thing is how do you understand that mix within, and that's the models and other things we talked about or testing. I'd say with an AI perspective, it's still so new for everybody in this room and the industry as a whole. I don't think there's an answer yet, but I can tell you what, from an agency perspective, so we have a director of AI that we brought in, actually built sort of from the ground up with him at the agency, and his role is to really understand what the opportunities are in sort of real life scenarios. So not necessarily the big pictures of where AI can go as an industry and robotics and natural language processing, all kinds of things AI can do, but more practicality. So how do we take this data and make plans better? How do we make them faster and smarter? How do we understand the combinations of channels, to your point of understanding that right mix to drive greater outcomes? So where AI can help us. AI is great at looking at large data sets and making very quick analysis of it. With that quick analysis, does a couple of things. The first thing it does is speeds up the process. Great, right? If you need to get plans done quickly or an analysis done quickly, AI can help you there. It frees up our people to spend less time doing the number crunching, and we can reallocate them into other roles. More client servicing, more client contact, more strategic thinking, more meeting with vendors and such, because they're not sitting there doing literally the additions and subtractions of necessary part of the job. The other thing about AI, and I find this fascinating as well, so I'm learning a lot as well. AI opens up insights that you would never think of. So forget about the number crunching for a second, which the algorithms do a good job in that. But it looks into things like trends, and if you give it enough good information, which is really a challenge, the prompts that you put in actually change the outcome that comes out of it. So 5 different people can ask the same question slightly differently. You'll actually get 5 different answers. So you got to take a lot lot of grains of salt with the outcome. But it challenges you. It makes you think the things you haven't thought about before. And I like that because we're sort of built into our own biases and such. So AI is expanding our thinking, which I really appreciate. And to me, if you can take those elements, speed, efficiency, the inquisitive nature of how AI thinks that humans don't think, and you could apply it to things like channel planning or media mix modeling, which I don't think anyone's really done yet. And I can't say that we're experts at it, but I think that could be a next evolution. I think that the world just opens up greatly, which is wonderful.
I love that. And I feel like if I'm reading between the lines here, tying this back to kind of where one of our panels yesterday closed, doesn't sound like you're worried about AI coming for your job anytime soon, but something that will enrich your ability to understand your business better.
I'll be retired by the time it comes to my job. So I think I'm okay. It's the next generation that may be a problem. One thing I did think about it, it's not that my job I think is safe, but a lot of the rank and file people who are the planners in the world, and the buyers of the world at the more junior level where you can replace, I don't think it's going to replace a physical body. I think what's going to happen is that person is going to change the job description. So for agency folks out here, or even on the vendor side or brand side, we look to hire advertising majors and marketing majors, or even liberal arts majors, and all that is great and fine. But the next generation of our hires are going to be coders, computer scientists, mathematicians. That's my director of AI. That's his background. It's computer science. So that's the world of the next generation. So I don't think it's necessarily the headcount's changing per se. I think the job description of who those people are is going to change radically in a very near future.
So start learning coding now.
100%.
Get your head in the game.
100%.
Well, thank you, Adam. I really appreciate you going deep into everything with us today on AI and measurement models. And I'd love to open it up to questions from the crowd.
Thank you.
That was a lot at 9 a.m. Sorry. I'm Brad, for 62 Above out in San Diego. So something that I struggle with is, like, you just said a lot of very smart things, and it's like I think some of us have, like, really pushed the envelope in terms of what success means with media plans. I find that a lot of clients are, like, behind, and not being rude, but, like, we're, like, making ratatouille, and they're like, I just wanted a hot dog. And so how do you approach pushing the clients to understand that they really want the ratatouille?
It's our obligation as an agency world to inform and educate. I mean, that's part of our job, is to bring them into what we know, to teach them. They are doing other things like running businesses and hiring and supply management. Like, they have a whole world of things they need to focus on. Marketing is just a sliver of it, and advertising and media is a sliver of that sliver. So I would never expect them to be experts at what we should be experts. So it's always incumbent of us to teach and to bring them along, because that's what they pay us for to a great degree. That said, how do you do it? Part of it is us understanding what it really is. Like, where I think we're all learning what we can to get as smart as we can. And I'm maybe I'm the tallest midget in the room kind of thing, but there's a whole world above me that I just don't understand. So we hire smart people to teach me so I can talk to clients. But I think it's incumbent. It's almost a mandate on us as a industry to continue to push the envelope, because it's the only way it's going to evolve. It may not be that first client that you bring it to. Maybe it's a second, maybe it's a third, but at some point you're going to break through, show the result, and then the floodgates open, and everybody's going to want to do it. And you can go back in time. I think we talked about this yesterday, that digital was where AI is now 20 years ago or more. And nobody wanted to do it. And I remember a time when cable, I don't know if I'm dating myself, but cable was like, if I can get 5% of my buy-in cable, it would be a big win. And that was a big sell. Now it's way over 50%. So there's going to be those times where it's you got to get cutting edge or bleeding edge, and eventually becomes the norm. We're still at the bleeding edge of AI for sure, and ultimately we will get there.
Thank you for a great panel, Yvonne Kinzer, Vantage Creative Group, and fractional CMO for several brands. Yvonne?
Who are you?
Oh, I say that. Yvonne Kinzer, yeah. Okay, I'll repeat again. Yvonne Kinzer, Vantage Creative Group. I know. Fractional CMO for several CPG brands. I want to double click in something that Doug asked at the beginning, which is related to the KPI strategy. So we understand that each channel has to be optimized individually, but we need a higher KPI or goal. So let's say that is brand awareness. When you see that that combination of channels based on their KPIs are not meeting the main goal, how do you use AI and how long it takes to optimize not the channel individually, but the mix?
Yeah, the channel mix is almost instantaneous. Like computers are doing this for us anyway. We don't necessarily have to lean in. The platforms are using AI. Mostly the Facebook and Google, they're already doing that to find the right audience, the right creative, and put the right dollars. Search is a great example of that. So a lot of that's happening. So rest assured, like there's work's being done on that end. Where it becomes a little more human element to it is understanding the bigger mix, which is, again, the same questions keep coming up, which means we still need to solve them if everyone has the same question. Just as an aside, so one of the panels the other day, we talked about AI, it's the AI panel, and one of the comments I had made is it's really two parts. It's the human intelligence and the machine intelligence. The machines are going to absolutely lap us in smartness. They'll solve things and way faster than humans can ever do. But the human element, making sense of it, is super important. Without the two combined, you're not going to get the answer. So having that additional human look at that information and put that nuanced approach to it, understand, why this wasn't a great sales day? You know what? There was road construction outside the building, and no one can get in, and that's why our sales are down 25%. AI would never know that, right? So it's just an example. Or it rained yesterday and the streets flooded. Oh yeah, that's the reason. So there's the human element super important, which gets me back to your point. This is where I think AI can only get us so far. AI is going to only take the inputs we give it to make a better outcome, if you will, or better results. The humans need to be part of it, the conversation. They need to understand it. And that's the hiring of those right people, the strategists that we still have to have in our team, the media directors who can interpret information and understand the client's business really in a really smart way. Those jobs are never going to go away. And I think those are the answers. I can't answer why your media mix is good or bad per se, but those are the people who are going to use the data that AI feeds them to come up with those answers for you. Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, you guys, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.